Welcome to Surviving Alzheimer's, Clarity, Courage, and Care. I'm your host, Teri Youngdale. Each week we come together to shine light on the Alzheimer's journey with honesty, compassion, and the knowledge you need to navigate this disease. So this week I'm going to ask for you to be patient with me. As I share this story with you, sometimes I struggle. This is certainly not the first time I've tried to record this today. So sometimes I struggle because the story is hard and there's a lot of emotion behind it for me, because it does include me and my mom and the journey that we've been on together, to address her journey with Alzheimer's disease. So today's episode is one many of you have been waiting for and have been asking for. Today, we're going to talk about two breakthrough medications that are changing the landscape of Alzheimer's treatment: Leqembi and Kisunla. These drugs are bringing new hope, but also new questions. So, who are they right for? Who should be cautious? And what do families need to know before taking this risk and making this big decision? So, let's start with a quick overview. Leqembi, whose generic name is lecanemab, and Kisunla, whose generic name is donanemab, are part of a new class of Alzheimer's medications called anti-amyloid antibodies. They target and help clear the amyloid plaques that build up in the brain. These are the plaques that are strongly linked to Alzheimer's disease. Now, here's the most important part. These drugs are not cures. These drugs are not the cure for Alzheimer's disease. They do not reverse damage that's already been done, but what they can do is slow the progression of memory loss and cognitive decline, especially when started early. Think of it like kind of like slowing down a train that's already moving. It's not going to stop the train, but it will give you more time before the disease reaches its later stages. So let's talk first about who should consider these medications. These medications are generally for people in the early stages of Alzheimer's. That means they've been diagnosed and people are talking about mild cognitive impairment. They might use the term mild dementia due to Alzheimer's. So those are kind of the key phrases that you'll hear for somebody that's a good candidate here. Doctors are going to run several tests to confirm eligibility. That will include an amyloid PET scan. Sometimes it will include a spinal fluid test. Sometimes they do both, but they do those to confirm that the amyloid is present. They also do cognitive testing, and this testing helps us see what stage of memory loss a person is in. They're also going to do genetic screening. What they're looking for is the APOE4 gene. And the reason why is because it can influence both the risk and side effects of the medication. So families should consider these treatments if their loved one is still in the early stages of memory loss. They'll have to go to a memory specialist. This is not just a neurologist, but someone who specializes in memory loss diseases. You'll need access to an infusion center. So there are lots of areas in the United States that are too remote to have an infusion center close by. So that's something that you'll need to consider. One of the things that I would encourage everyone to consider that is facing Alzheimer's disease is reaching out to an Alzheimer's research center. They're in all of the major cities, all the major hubs, and some of the smaller cities. But as we'll talk later, Alzheimer's research touches a deep place in my heart. And so I strongly encourage you to reach out to those centers also. You'll also have to be ready to commit to frequent clinic visits for the infusions, for MRIs, for additional PET scans, and for ongoing monitoring. These medications are not casual medications. This is not as simple as popping a pill. There is a serious commitment behind starting this medication, but for the right person, they give you more time, more meaningful time with your family. Now let's talk about who should not consider taking these medications. So who would be a good fit? Leqembi and Kisunla are not recommended for people in moderate to severe stages of Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, at that point of the disease is just too far advanced, and that's hard to hear. I know that's hard to hear, but it's important for me to state that because the earlier that you get involved, the sooner you begin this medication, the better it is for you. Anyone who cannot safely undergo frequent MRIs, those are the scans that they use to check and see what side effects are or are not taking place. People with certain medical conditions like bleeding disorders or anyone on a blood thinner is not a good candidate for this medication. Blood thinners combined with Leqembi or Kisunla greatly increase the risk of brain swelling and bleeding. Some families don't have the resources to support regular infusions and monitoring, not just because of financial issues, but because of time constraints. So many people that do or are considering taking Leqembi or Kisunla are not driving anymore. So they're going to need someone to take them to all of their appointments. It was important to me for one of us to be at all of Mom's appointments simply because I wanted to hear what the doctor had to say. I wanted to take the notes so I could keep track of where she was. And she wasn't in a position where she could remember everything. So that's part of the consideration and part of the commitment that you as a family member or a loved one are making is to help them get to those appointments. Or have a loved one that is strongly independent and comfortable taking a car service like Uber. Personally, my mom was not comfortable with that, so that wasn't something that was an option for us. Both Leqembi and Kisunla are very expensive. Their estimated cost for the medication for just a year is $26,000. But it's important to know that they are FDA approved, which also means they're covered by Medicare and should be covered by your insurance. It doesn't mean your insurance company is going to make it easy for you, but they should be covered. If you do not have insurance or Medicare, you might be eligible for some of the financial support programs that are available from the manufacturers. For more information for those programs, you can definitely talk to your neurologist or contact me for more information. I'm more than happy to give you all of the literature on that and show you how you can reach out to the manufacturers. So there are some really serious potential side effects that you could experience with this medication. The big side effect that you hear people talk about is called ARIA. ARIA stands for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. That's when an abnormality shows up in a brain scan, but it's basically swelling or small bleeds in the brain. You'll hear them as an ARIA E. The E stands for embolism, which is swelling, and ARIA H. H stands for hemorrhage. which is a brain bleed. Most people recover from this. Um, I only know of 3 people out of the 35,000 at least that have taken this medication that did not do well on it, and unfortunately became a fatal outcome. But most people do recover. But that's why they do the MRI monitoring. And MRI monitoring is not negotiable. So here's where sometimes I get emotional with this because it's the human side. So we're going to step away from the science for a minute, and I'm going to share my story on why this matters so much to me personally. Back in the mid 90s, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Over the next 3 to 4 years, we watched her decline from being a very strong and proud, independent woman, someone who never left the house without her hair being perfect, her car being perfectly clean. She was a proud, strong, independent woman. And we watched her go to someone who couldn't remember how to use her mouth to make the sounds that would create words. Um, there's a lot more behind that, but in my last interaction with her, that was what I experienced, was her using these guttural burping sounds to try to create words. Um, it's it's a horrible disease because for her, it only got worse from there. Having recently experienced my grandmother's decline and death, my mom started showing signs of memory loss. She was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment in 2018. And truthfully, mild cognitive impairment is a title. It's just a nicer way of telling someone they have Alzheimer's disease, truthfully, because that's just the earlier stages of Alzheimer's disease. So my mom was given that diagnosis in 2018. But as it turns out, my tiny little mom, at only 5 foot tall, is a fighter. She did not like the way the neurologist so callously told her that she had mild cognitive impairment. And when my mom asked, oh, okay, what comes next? She just said, well, Alzheimer's, of course. How do you say that to someone? How how do you deliver that kind of news that way? This was a seasoned neurologist. This was not a young woman new to her practice. This was a woman in her 50s, a woman who had been practicing as a neurologist for at least 25 years. Um, but this news cut my mom right to the core. Um, it's hard to communicate in words how devastated she was because she had witnessed and experienced the sometimes unspeakable horrors that her mom had experienced and slowly died from. When the neurologist spoke to my mom that way, everything, every personality trait that my mom had just kind of fell away. She said, no, absolutely not. That's not my future. And so quietly, she researched all the treatment solutions that she could find on the computer. She went back to her crafting room, put her needlepoint away, put her quilting away, put all of her crochet projects to the side, and researched everything she could on potential Alzheimer's treatment solutions. She wasn't telling us this, but she kept her eyes and ears open to anything that could provide hope. One day, she was in the waiting room of one of my dad's many doctor's appointments, and she found a free little magazine called the Senior's Blue Book. And the Senior's Blue Book you would find in doctor's offices all over the country. Um, and so she found the Dallas area version of the Senior's Blue Book. And, as she's waiting for my dad to be called back, she started going through the magazine and she found an ad in there for Kirwan Medical Center. And the ad said they were working towards a cure for Alzheimer's, and they actually provided treatments for Alzheimer's disease. She held on to that magazine for a few weeks, and eventually she showed it to me. She asked me if I would go on the appointment with her, if she would call and schedule an appointment. So absolutely, I would go with her. It took her some time to gather the courage to make that call. And I really didn't understand at the time what she could be afraid of. But it took me a while to figure out that she was afraid that she would call them and they wouldn't have a solution for her. And she would have to meet with another healthcare provider that would take away her reason for living. And so that's why she was afraid. She did make the call. She scheduled the appointment, and we did go in to Kirwan Medical Center together. We met with one of the research coordinators, and they told us about a research program called Band 2401. So she went through an exhaustive medical review. They pulled all of her medical history, detailed medication reviews, again, pulled everything about every pill that woman ever took. They did encourage us to work with her primary care physician to make some medication tweaks. She had an MRI, she had a PET scan, she had a lumbar puncture, which is not easy for anybody to go through. But after all of that, we learned that mom did qualify for Band 2401 for the research study, and she was accepted into a phase 3 trial. Now, the phase 3 trial gave us a lot of comfort because we knew that it had already been tested in animals. It had been tested in humans, and they were a few months, at that point, they were a few months into the phase 3 trial. Each one of those trials has to be reviewed and accepted by the FDA. So we knew there was promise there. We knew it was showing promise. So I'm going to take a break here for just a second with a side note, because it is important to note that right now there is a separate phase 3 clinical trial of Leqembi. The trial name is AHEAD, AHEAD space 3-45. That program is currently evaluating lecanemab in individuals with preclinical Alzheimer's disease. That means they're clinically normal, but they do have elevated amyloid levels in their brain. So that study is ongoing. And if that's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to stop this video, make a note of it, and go research it. So going back to mom's story, she went through all of that testing through the early months of 2020. But by late February and early March of 2020, the world came to a stop. Um, in February, we were concerned about a virus, and by the middle of March, the world shut down. That also meant that Kirwan Medical Center had to close. Um, so we did not know if and when we were going to be able to participate in that. At that time, I was given the opportunity to work at a small independent pharmacy, serving not only, standard patients who need their day-to-day prescription medications, but also patients who were interested in functional medicine to boost their immune systems. We were swamped helping people boost their immunity to prevent the disease with pharmaceutical grade supplements. The line that went around the pharmacy, no exaggeration, was oftentimes 20 cars deep. And there were multiple people in each one of those cars. So they could not come into the lobby, but we could meet with them through the drive-through. And so I thought I would be there for a few weeks, maybe at the most a few months until this virus went away, because, they said that if we shut down for 2 weeks, it would clear. Obviously, it didn't. Um, it was October that Kirwan Medical Center was able to open and accept new patients back into the trial that we were working on, or that we had originally talked to them about. But the pharmacy was still swamped. Just and our lobby wasn't even open at that time. It was still just people in the drive-through. So yeah, the virus lasted more than a few weeks and more than a few months. So by the fall, my dad accepted the position as our study partner. I stayed at the pharmacy and continued to work there. But unfortunately, in May of 2021, we lost my dad. We just didn't just lose him in the street somewhere. My dad passed away. Um, and so my mom needed to put the study on hold as she took time to mourn and really re-envision what she wanted out of her life. So in August, she went back and had to do a lot of testing again, more blood work, more MRIs. And I don't remember if there was a PET scan or not. I know there wasn't a lumbar puncture, but I believe there was an MRI at that time. So since Dad wasn't here, as he was passing, one of the things that he was very clear about was that he wanted Mom to continue with the study. And I promised him that I would do everything I could to make it happen. And fortunately, my boss at this little independent pharmacy that was swamped day in and day out said, yeah, I understand that this is important to you, and you can have every Monday off to take your mom. I'm sorry, not every Monday, every other Monday off. You can have that time off to take your mom in for the treatments. I was in a position as a study partner that very few study partners will ever be in, ever. How it's very rare that an employer is going to say, yeah, take 26 Mondays off. But he did, and we were able to continue, and Mom was able to start the infusions again. So I am eternally grateful to my employer at the time that let me do that. This is when Mom and I started our 4-year journey with Leqembi. I sat by her side as her study partner through appointment after appointment. And in those appointments, that's when she received her infusion. I went to every scan, I went to every infusion that I could. When I couldn't go, because COVID hit me pretty hard a couple of times, um, my sisters went in 100%. There were times that I had to call her that day and say I wasn't going to be able to make it that day. And my sister dropped everything that she had and went in my place. Both of my nieces went at least once. So someone in our family was with her at every single appointment. And that was really important to us. Um, but keep in mind, we did more than just pump her full of medications. We worked very closely with her as she moved into an independent living program to change her diet and eliminate as much processed food as possible. And the chef at the place that she lived was very accommodating with this. And we, again, that's somebody else that we greatly appreciate for the work that they did to help support us. So we changed her diet. She increased her exercise. You know, well, we live in Texas where it's so blazing hot the majority of the year. There in the facility that she lived, there was plenty of room for her to walk the hallways. And she and her friend Diane would start on the fourth floor and do a lap and then go down to the third floor and make a lap and go all the way down, go back up to four and work their way down again as they both focused on their exercise. So that was a big key and a big change that she made. We also added pharmaceutical grade supplemental nutrition. What does that mean? It means that we supplemented her diet with what a lot of people would just refer to as vitamins. But these were metagenics. They do have FDA oversight, not on every single product that they put out, but it was a product that I am 100% confident carried the nutrition in it that the bottle said it did, unlike what you're going to find at a big box store. So we did make that change to her nutrition, both of those changes to her nutrition. She stayed very active in church and maintained her relationship with God with her daily prayers. That's equally as important as changing the diet, is maintaining that positive relationship. And she fell in love again. So that's a really that's big when it comes to success with this medication. It wasn't easy. There were lots of risk, and at a lot of times there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear because she experienced multiple ARIA events. She experienced multiple ARIA-E's with brain swelling. She experienced multiple ARIA-H's with brain bleeds. When they happened, they told us they were never going to heal, that she would always have that damage in her brain. And that was scary. It was very scary. Um, but that little 5 foot taller, or 5 foot taller, that little 5 foot tall fighter is doing very well today. She got through those hemorrhages, and it was her choice each time to continue. And as we get into other podcasts, I'll talk about why she wanted to continue and what was the driving force that kept her in this study for so long. But today, she's not declining the way that neurologist told her she would, because she said no and she fought. So, in fact, as I sit here and as I'm recording this today, she is across town packing up all of her treasures and moving out of her independent living apartment. She is moving into her new fiance's house because mom is getting remarried over Labor Day weekend. She is going to marry her first boyfriend from junior high school. He is so good to her, so supportive of everything that she has needed in her journey. I could not be happier for her. I really could not be happier for her. But it's kind of ironic that recording this today, it came on the same day as she's moving into his house to get remarried. But this is the gift that this medication can give. It's a second chance at life for someone who's experiencing memory loss. Just as chemo is a second chance at life, oftentimes for someone with cancer. It's not a cure. And I can't promise mom that she's not going to start to decline at some point. I don't know that. But right now, it's giving us more time. And that time might be measured in months. It might be measured in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 50. I don't know. I don't even know if the manufacturers know how much more time that's going to give my mom or other patients. But this last weekend, we went shopping for wedding dresses. 5 years ago, there's no way we would have ever thought that she was shopping for a wedding dress. And she picked one, and it's gorgeous. Um, so that's the gift here. It's more time. It's more moments. It's more holidays. It's more life for you to share with someone you loved. And so that's why I started Memory Treatment Advisors. So I can work with families to understand these treatments, to understand the true risk, to understand what an ARIA-H is, and let you hear mom describe what it feels like. Because you don't have pain receptors in your brain, so you can't feel pain. But there's an explosion in your brain. Anyways, so that's why I started this, is so we can share that information with you firsthand and help you get through the overwhelming fear and choices that you have to make if you're going to take the medication. So here's the bottom line. The takeaway is Leqembi and Kisunla are not for everyone, but for the right person at the right time. These medications changed the course of this disease. So if you or someone you love is wondering whether these treatments might be right, find the neurologist that specializes in memory care. Talk to a memory care specialist, or call me. Schedule some time with me and we'll go through it. I have free 10-minute clarity calls, and I can bust through a 10-minute clarity call to give you really good information, and I'm happy to provide it at no charge. If you want more time and if you want to go into more detail, I'm happy to do that too. But you can give me a call and I'll be happy to do that with you. So thank you for listening to today's episode of Surviving Alzheimer's: Clarity, Courage, and Care. If you found this helpful, if you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching it on my website, or on Facebook, please share it with someone that you care about. Let them know that there is hope, that they might have an opportunity, that second opportunity at life. Um, and give me a, a shout out with any questions. Join me next week and we'll continue this journey together. I'm Teri, reminding you that even in the face of Alzheimer's, we live in a time where there is always hope, clarity, and courage. Thank you.